System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Sunday, April 6th. I am Amin TMK alongside the entire Inner City Left crew. Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler and Keita DeMuscle. Keita, hello. Emoja, hello.
Yo.
Hello, good sirs.
Hello.
Yes, we've talked about this for a long time, y'all. We've been doing this quite a while. I remember back we had a podcast called "We're Not Voting for Joe Biden." I don't know if we had a podcast saying we're not.
No, this can't be. Do you want Trump? Boo! Shut the fuck up. You sound like children.
Yeah. And of course, we talked obviously also about we're not voting for Kamala Harris. And again, I don't want to get too deep into that. You know our philosophy. We're third party voters. If voting is something that is a part of your praxis, it is for mine. But I do want to talk about old Donnie J for a little bit because the kid is back in town, man. And he's been doing some work here. Look, I'm not an economist. I actually am not good with money. I don't know if you guys know this. Like, I'm a socialist. Like, I don't even like the concept and thought of money, but it is like a part of society. But economics looking bad, okay? If you follow the mainstream media, which I don't, but I guess I'm saying it, it looks bad. I asked you both if you knew anything about what's happening with the stock market. It's, I don't want to say free fall crash. I don't know, but it's looking bad again. And you pointed me to a Ferris Bueller clip of one of the teachers, talking in the class about how in the Great Depression, there was this idea that tariffs were going to alleviate that. And it just made the Great Depression worse. I would suggest go watch Ferris Bueller's Day Out. I think we all can say a great film, yes?
Yeah, TL. First off, Chicago's the greatest city in fucking America if we're not talking about New Orleans. So, of course, that. But, that was Ben Stein, man. From, Win Ben Stein's Money. He was actually...
We know him from the Visine commercials, the millennials.
Right, there it is. But dude is hardly some fucking bastion of communist thought. He's a fucking very conservative Republican, and he really believes that. So what the fuck does that tell you about, how far the Republicans have gone? You know what I'm saying? To the point whereas in the 80s, we could talk jokes about what happens when you just decide to start throwing tariffs on all these countries when you have a country that is kind of dependent on the world to make most of the things. We believe in globalism. Not myself, but I'm saying de facto as an American, right? The American way of life is only made possible through its all-in position on global trade, free trade, all of that shit. You know what I'm saying? So now that you're tariffing everything costs more. Because Americans import everything.
Yeah, Keita, I wanted to ask you, I feel like I lean on you a little bit when it comes to these economic conversations as well. What are your thoughts on the last few days and sort of the American economy? Is it something we should be worried about? What are your thoughts, and where is sort of these Donnie J tariffs, kind of taking us?
Oh, yeah. I mean, folks should be worried. The only people who aren't worried are the people who have the liquidity and the assets to weather this. But billionaires love recessions. And I think that's what's really hard for the average American to consider is that because they're well, this means that I won't have a home. Yeah, that's what capital wants. We're in that stage of capitalism. I mean, in some ways, there's a new author who's we're in techno-feudalism, actually. It's just getting transformed into something different. But the thing about capital is that it wants to punish you for not having any. And a recession ensures it takes care of all of the problems that billionaires feel like they have, but that they've entirely fabricated, which is that people don't want to work because you keep taking away all of our jobs with AI, and that people are complaining too much about the high price of everything because they're completely removed from the average cost of things like renting a home. They don't rent. They never have to worry about things like that. That they don't even buy their own groceries. Like, what concept would they have of that in order to relate to us? Which is why it is imperative that government stop people from accruing and amassing and hoarding this much wealth. Because there's a certain amount of wealth where they're like, yeah, the whole country can burn. What the fuck do I care? As long as they don't come after me. And so all of this is Trump doing what he promised, and the promises he made was never to voters. The promises he made were to billionaires, were to these mega corporations that absolutely want to steal every ounce of worth from the entire globe. There is no stopping point for them. There is no concept of this is enough. And until the world rises up and stops them, things are going to absolutely get economically worse because the only economics that count are those of billionaires. And unfortunately, they can buy enough to make an economy seem like it's doing well, which is why the way China kind of views the economy and like what is wealth for a country, that's why we have to shift our idea of wealth. It's not stock markets, as Tanky said, that's all speculation. And it's definitely not in the billions that they're hoarding. That we have to say, hey, does everybody in this country have a home? Does everybody in this country have food to eat? Does everybody in this country have good health? Like, those are the things that make a country wealthy, but we're not in that place yet in the United States, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just want to tap in on what you said. You know, I remember that was a big part of like my education, right? Always talking about like the Great Depression, you know. And I remember I would ask my teachers, like, well, where did the money go? Oh, the money was just gone. Like, yo, if I take the water out of the ocean, the water from the ocean might not be there, but the water still exists. If the money's gone, where did the money go, right? And that's where we are right now. As everybody's rumoring, there may be some type of crash, right? I'm seeing a lot of chatter in my sources that these stock markets are responding very badly. You know, that's what it is. But again, ask yourself, why is it some people are recession proof? Some people are depression proof, you know? It's just interesting to me, you know, and we talked about it on a broadcast recently. Like in the 80s, there were less than 40 billionaires in the world. Now there's hundreds of them, right? Like, how is it that there are so many more resources that even exist, right? One, a lot of this is imaginary assets because it's all stock evaluations, which, as we said, is just a little bit of gambling. You know, you get to determine the price of a stock is controlled in lots of ways, but a lot of it is evaluations. Very few of these corporations are liquid to the point whereas their evaluations match what they can actually pull. Like you could, you know, can IBM go to a bank and pull out 400 billion? Like, unlikely. You know what I'm saying? IBM probably couldn't pull 40 billion out right now if they had to do it, you know? And so, like, you know, if your stock is all tied into whatever IBM stock evaluation is, automatically we're talking about a number that's not real. We're not talking about something that's backed by commodities like gold or even petroleum, right? Well, Aramco, right? But that's not an American company, right? American companies are just all backed on these evaluations. And so if there's instability in the market because people don't trust it, there's going to be a run. And these tariffs, I think, has provided exactly the kind of fuel that's been needed. And we'll see. And maybe the market will stabilize. You know, I was talking to a friend this weekend. She's like, oh, you know, the American market's always they always correct themselves. I'm trying to buy on the dip. You know, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, sometimes the dip is endless, you know. And again, they talked about this on Wall Street too, more than a decade ago, you know. And it's just fascinating to me. You know, it's like the mortgage market. People always thought like, oh, houses always appreciate. They never depreciate. That's, you know, why not buy a second? Why not buy a third? And everyone is leveraged to the fucking hilt. You know, no one really has any of this money that's liquid. It's all tied up on paper. It's tied up in this stock. It's tied up in my 401k. It's tied up in Bitcoin. It's tied up, but, we still laugh at the people that, well, I'm just saying. We used to laugh at the people that kept money in the house. Oh, grandpa, he got the money on the mattress. But grandpa could get that money.
Grandpa could get that money. But also the thing about speculation is it does actually rely on stability. And Trump is a charismatic presence that doesn't care about stability. It's about how does he look in the grand scheme of things, which is why having celebrities as politicians is really not good, because then what do they care about? More of their image, more of getting in front of the camera. And so, yeah, the stocks are plummeting because essentially it's a sign that folks, the average person in America cannot sustain what's happening to the country anymore. But again, billionaires don't care because they're like, well, people will stay in the few jobs that are available. Everybody else will be threatened with signs of homelessness and now increase. And this is why we talk about how things are interconnected too, because of course there's increased domestic military here called the police, and both Democrats and Republicans have absolutely pushed into, we need more people going into it. And unfortunately, this is when you find out who the class traitor are, where they're like, I cannot weather the storm. And so my only outlet is to justify why I must go into the police or into security and start then oppressing other people. I mean, there's just so many dystopian books that talk about this, but all of this is related. Plus, the other fact is, and this is what we keep harping on too, is that they don't care how shaky the economy is because they don't give a shit about whether you're solvent, because they just want enslaved labor at the end of the day. Of course, they want you to be homeless so they can disappear you more easily, just like Trump is doing with these horrific deportation policies. He doesn't care. He is opening prisons. And we already know that prison labor is what is keeping the United States afloat. Like all of these great companies that were like, oh, how do they do it? They do it with enslaved labor.
Great points, everyone. I want to bring this up. This is something I've been hearing. Do you know this guy, Howard Lutnick? I'm sure you've seen him. He's the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. He said a lot of fun things as of late, including everyone's going to be buying a $30,000 Elon Musk robot. And if you don't have one, you're going to be the one that looks silly. But, I've been hearing a lot, and not just him, but I know this is sort of the talking point, the Trump talking point. Well, Australia won't buy our beef. Well, so-and-so won't buy our goods, and they won't buy our stuff. And they go through this list of products that European countries or Australian countries or global South countries won't buy from us, but we purchase a great deal of from them. And so often when you go into the reasons why these countries don't like American goods, especially food, it's because the regulation is trash. Like, we don't want to buy your beef. We don't want to have your material goods because the way that your country is set up is based on profit motive, everything, even Boeing airplanes, which you were making hand over fist money wise, and you still decided to cut costs. Everyone, let's use Dawn liquid dish soap instead of the proper the lubricants that we would use for an airplane door. And the United States, again, I think, luxury brands. I think of the United States, I think of like we are selling sort of, a luxurious lifestyle to the rest of the world. But, it looks like more and more. And I mean, again, I don't think anyone has to go too far to see that I'm a big fan of Claudia Sheinbaum, but she understands that the United States and Mexican economies are completely tied together. Do you feel this? And I'll start with you, Tanky. I see you. It's a geopolitical question, and I know you're also the beef guy. You're you can maybe speak to the difference between American beef and Australian or Japanese beef. But like the rest of the world is like not really interested in our goods. And I think that's having a problem with the economy. I'll start with you, Tanky. Let me hear your thoughts, and then Muscle, I'll go to you.
Well, I'll give you an example. This was, I found myself in Japan a couple of years ago, for the first time. And one of the things I like to do when I'm on the road, I like to get a good steak, man. It's definitely one of my weaknesses. And make me strong, you know. And I remember the first time I sat down at a Japanese steakhouse and they had American steaks, which were a good price. It was about the price I expected to pay if I went to a Morton's or, a Ruth Chris, something like that. And then I saw the price of Japanese steak. And, I'm not a person that is like beset with like this Americana feeling, all the time. It's actually a very rare feeling for me, like the hoorah. But like as an American, like, and from the South, you know what I'm saying, where we put quite a bit of pride in a lifestyle, I like bugged out for a second. I'm like, why is this Japanese steak cost hella more? And then I tried Kobe for the first time in Japan. And the shit was spiritual. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing to even begin to compare with it in the American experience. It's like trying to describe snow to someone in the Sahara. Like, the level of quality difference was upsetting to me. You know what I'm saying? As a dude that eats steaks quite, I was like, well, what the fuck? Someone help, right? And it's the same way if you're talking about, Japanese beef is the best in the world. I didn't know that, but now I do. Australian beef is also really freaking good. American beef, here's the thing. The prices are good. The prices are good because of the way that we've deregulated it. The USDA has ensured that you can use this amount of antibiotics, this amount of, grain, all of these things. Americans and the billionaire class in America have paid for decades to make sure that the industries are deregulated. But in the rest of the world, there is regulations. There are things that you have to do to livestock to make sure they're worthy of being sold. And the literal reason why, the stated government reason from Australia right now is they have fears of mad cow disease. I used to joke about this in the day when Burger King got caught in Europe with this scandal and they had horse meat, and I said to myself, they caught it because they checking for it. In America, they're not checking for jack shit. It's hyperbolic what I'm saying, but the standards for American livestock and American agriculture are incredibly low compared to what the rest of the world has. And so when you're looking at these trade deficits, it's not like even, they hate America. Often that's not even the reality. The reality is American goods are not fit for consumption based upon the standards that the rest of the world has. And so, like, when Trump is like, well, we'll tariff you, he's punishing these other countries for not being deregulated so that American corporations would be able to once again compete.
Oh gosh, I think like this is also part of the hubris of anybody who lives in the United States, and we have to fight against this every single day. The rest of the world reads the news, y'all. Like, they pay attention to what's going on a global scale, and they feel they have to be more keyed in on what we're doing here in the United States than anywhere else, because as Tanky said, we are driving that deregulation across the globe. We are driving this accelerated sapping of resources, whether the earth can contain it or not. We're the ones who are propelling, like making drinking water massively unclean just so that we can produce more goods every single year, faster and cheaper and harder. And the rest of the world is not stupid. They see that. We just last year faced an incident in which sick beef cows were taken across our state lines here in the United States, with the beef industry and even like the Department of Agriculture colluding and hiding the fact that those beef were sick. And so when I'm looking at this across the other members of the country, I'm like, you're lying to your own citizens about sick cows, about sick chickens, about like just sick livestock. The fact that we even have a few of the regulations telling us that our spinach has E. coli, even our vegetables aren't clean and good. And the rest of the world sees that. They pay attention because in some ways, they're not as far gone as we are here in the United States. They have a modicum of like, hey, this probably wouldn't be good to feed to humans. Maybe we shouldn't do that. I mean, right now we're testing our cows for bird flu because like we've had the spillover effect. We did not manage the bird flu in all of the chickens and the ducks and turkeys that we domesticated, that it managed to spill over into cows. And we now have to worry about, is it going to cross that barrier and jump to humans, which there are reports that it has jumped to some humans in Texas, which we're hiding because the entire CDC has been dismantled. But even before it was dismantled, the United States would not sign on to what the WHO was doing or what any global health organization was saying and how we should manage illnesses in both humans and livestock, or even in any kind of animal that crosses the United States shore. And so here we are. And it's like the United States is completely oblivious to this because it's like, oh, of course our cows are clean. Nothing that comes from the United States is clean. And the rest of the world knows that. But our propaganda is so good to citizens that it's like, no, we have the best. As Tanky was willing to admit, why are their cows like more expensive? Why is their steak better? And this is also why the United States doesn't want you to travel overseas and why they want you to still have the most American experience if you do travel overseas, because then you'll see, oh, I don't have to live like this.
I want to, great points, everyone. I want to just pivot a little bit. We obviously we're big opponents of the Democratic Party and still are. We are opponents of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And one of the biggest reasons, obviously we've been off it for quite some time, but, we were talking about this with Mike from Turn Leftist. There was so much of the Democratic Party's like faux morals or faux ethics that were just disappeared because of the G-side currently happening in Palestine. Okay. And I think they lost a lot of, I don't know, credit. Whatever you want to call it. And they've been doing everything they can, the Democrats, to get back to some sort of credibility. There was a big rally not too long ago with Bernie Sanders. America, we're going to get rid of the billionaires, have the billionaires, but I do like what Trump is doing at the border. He's doing a great job at the border. He's keeping immigrants out. AOC there was 40,000 people. All look like senior citizens to me, respectfully. You know what I mean? Not the young people that we are used to in an AOC Bernie Sanders rally. And this past week, at Inner City Left, we haven't talked about it much because it's the most incredibly performative thing I've ever seen in my life. And that's Cory Booker. Cory Booker spoke for 25 straight hours. And I bring up Palestine because he didn't really mention it. He didn't really mention, the main issue that's going on with the Democratic Party, which is the support of a G-side. Again, the Republicans are doing their thing. But in 2019, he backed anti-BDS legislation. 2019, he told AIPAC, if I forget Israel, I will not. In 2001, he pushed normalization with Arab states at Palestinian expenses. I just want to talk a little bit about the ridiculousness of the Democratic Party. We've talked about it a lot, but these are just, again, more ridiculous performative aspects. Your thoughts, Tanky, and then we'll go to you, Keita.
Well, here's what I would say. It's important to remember, right? When we say that the Democrats are performative, that's not just me being a mean leftist. It's the fucking truth. Like, okay, so something that I've noticed a lot over the past couple of weeks, and last week specifically, was Barack Obama himself talking about, Trump's over excessive utilization of the way that he's been grabbing these students. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, how is this happening? Right? And then I remember to myself, well, damn, you are a Juris Doctorate, magna cum laude, right? From motherfucking Harvard Law. Why don't you hustle the fuck up and I don't know. Go represent some of these people. You're one of the few people on earth that probably has a security clearance, so you'd be able to read into the government file in a way that most lawyers wouldn't even be able to do during discovery. Oh well, we would let you read this, but it's classified. You don't got no classification, son. Yeah, right. So the government gets to go into court essentially and not provide discovery, which is a critical part of the American and Western, whole judicial experience. I know what the government has on me. They know what I have. We are playing with the same bag, right? But that's not where we are anymore. And I was like, well, why is that? And then I remembered, oh, wait, in 2011, right? Barack Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act into law, which then and there allowed indefinite detentions. This isn't something that Trump did. Trump is utilizing a literal law signed into power by Barack Obama himself. So this man is criticizing literal legal practices put into place by his administration. Whether or not he used them, he put them into power specifically and codified this. And this is why even back then, leftists were talking about the Democratic Party as not a reliable partner. So then how wolf ticket is it to have Democrats complaining about the practices that they themselves literally codified? And he doesn't even feel sorry about it, not in a real way. Because again, as a lawyer, right, this is a person with a legal degree, he could go and defend these people. Look, there's even a presidential, that's the whole fucking Amistad movie. John Quincy Adams. Oh my God, these people are free people. I'm the president, but I'm gonna fucking defend them. I'm a lawyer. Barack don't even do that shit. Right? This is what I'm talking about, like the whole nature of how incredibly performative the Democratic performance is. That's the thing that comes to my mind most immediately.
Yeah, as Tinky said, it's theatrics. And the difficult part about theatrics like this, I feel, is because, of course, you see, for folks who are not as, for folks who are not paying attention to politics the way that folks like us do, who understand the history of the United States, theatrics like this are really, they feel good. Oh, Cory Booker is standing up for us. He's doing what's right. And yet it's like, Cory Booker's been in office for how freaking long? Why do we have to wait to hear? The Democrats told us even before voting that if Trump gets into office again, it is the worst thing that will happen to the world. So why didn't you use this filibuster power when it was, you said it was dire? And now, like, shit's getting even more dire, and all you can do is just be like, well, I beat Strom Thurmond's speech, which is significant. Okay. Yeah, Strom Thurmond. But I also can't help but see the theatrics of it, because I'm like, I watch movies and media, I read books, I have critical literary analysis in me that I really enjoy. And this is one of them. How? Oh, it's just so convenient. A Black man breaks the record of Strom Thurmond. That's theatrics. Cory Booker was selected to make this choice, right? And in order to give the American people that false sense of hope that, don't worry, things are going to get better. And yet every single day since then, things have only gotten significantly worse. The Democrats are doing nothing to help people because they are part of the billionaire class. They stand to benefit from an impending recession. They are benefiting from tariffs.
Keita, just one quick thing, right? When you're talking about, Strom Thurmond was filibustering desegregation. You know what I'm saying? Like, as a Southerner, he did not want to see segregation end. So, like, I at least understand the principle that he's filibustering for. Cory Booker wasn't filibustering shit. He literally just got up and talked for a lot. And he slightly delayed someone who was having a confirmation hearing that, by the way, was still confirmed. So, like, again, it's not even fair to compare him to Strom Thurmond, because Strom Thurmond was getting shit done.
No, it's not a comparison. It's understanding the theatrics of it, right? Strom Thurmond is a white man who was fighting against desegregation. And then in opposition to him, like right out of a script of a movie, you have a Black man who's, I don't know, standing up for freedom, general human rights, I guess.
All good conversation. I think something that also comes to mind, like when we think of Cory Booker, is like, for people who are like, oh, the last person to do it was Strom Thurmond, did we all acknowledge this symbolism was irrelevant, everyone? Like, I mean, we talked about this with the Trump administration. Me and Tanky talk about it all the time. You know, Donald Trump, they're all performative too. They're not even getting things done, you know, for particular aspects of their constituency, especially when it comes to poor people, you know, and they just do things. I mean, the whole Doge thing, that was a whole and continues to remain, you know, like a whole you know, performative story. You know, like we're just cutting social services. You don't need an agency to do that. The United States government is already making that happen. You know, so I don't want to get too far into this, but I do want to just acknowledge that. Remember when we always had like Blinken or like any of the spokespeople for the Democratic Party dancing around every question in response to Gaza, you know, and, oh, we're going to investigate that, and Israel's investigating that, and all those things. I mean, the Trump administration is sort of like doesn't even care. They're not even getting involved. So there was another conversation. This is with new State Department spokesperson. I don't know their name. I'm sure we'll get it sooner or later. Talking about the 15 aid workers that were killed in Gaza, deliberately killed in Gaza. Again, this is not a new thing. Aid workers are killed all the time in Gaza. And this has been happening now this happened last week, but has been sort of happening. And she just blurted out after like several of these questions, every single thing that is happening in Gaza is happening because of Hamas. And that's basically the line that they've been using throughout the new, like, you know, again, State Department conversation. And again, I hope that sort of like, I don't know if you know these guys, like the influencers like Theo Von. I only say Theo Von because he's like a UFC fan, so maybe you've heard of him. But like these like right-leaning, like I'm not Joe Rogan type guys, they were crying. They were crying. It was Palestinians. Oh, no. And, you know, I hear so much less of that coming sort of from the right-wing influencer types. And it looks like, again, and I talked about this, you know, when we discussed sort of voting for Kamala Harris, and that means you're voting for a G side. And, you know, like that's the Democratic Party was the party of a G side. I mean, and they still are. But the Republicans are now fully in on it. The MAGA people are fully in, and all the people that said pull back, anti-war, we're out of, we don't need to be blowing up children. All these people, they're just sort of again fell by the wayside. And I'm just wondering, and I'll start with you, Muscle, and then I'll go to you, Tanky. Sort of like, you know, not really much of an anti-war movement that is substantial. The anti-war movement in America always seems to be just in contention with whatever party I'm not, and we never get an actual movement of maybe the military-industrial complex needs to come to an end and these forever wars need to come to an end. Keita?
Well, then first the United States would have to admit that it's caused pretty much 80% of the wars around the globe. Like, we'd have to admit that in a really big way. Which is how I felt when folks were talking about how terrible Russia was for invading Ukraine without looking at all of the historical background. Same thing with Israel. Like, how long has Palestine been trying to tell people, hey, they're massacring us? It's for 75 plus years. They're massacring us. And the United States is complicit in that, is complicit in, we can't even acknowledge our attempted genocide here in the United States against Native Indigenous people, an ongoing genocide as we continue to take more of their land under the auspice that there aren't enough Native Indigenous people because we give them this idea of blood quantum, which nobody else has to do. Honestly, the ongoing genocide against Black people, considering like, and Latinos as well, because of the white fear of being surpassed. Latinos should have surpassed white people in the United States in terms of sheer population numbers, just from births and immigration years ago. And yet somehow that never happened. Same thing with Black people. There's always this fear that there's too many Black babies, that they don't even take care of their babies. Like, what are they doing? And yet here, white people still somehow have all of the systemic power that we can imagine. And so the fact that the United States can't even admit the atrocities that we continue to commit domestically and across the globe, of course, then the conversation can never come up around why does the Department of Defense get billions that are vanishing? And it's because we're funding implicitly or explicitly all of these proxy wars across the globe because it benefits capital. Destabilizing countries is actually very lucrative and making money. I mean, Tinky brought up Wall Street. That's something that comes up in multiple movies. Hey, we did that. What? Like watching Snowfall, where then people is absolutely being like, hey, you know what can get us money for this other war is definitely selling drugs to Black communities. And really, it would be dismantling that, which is a little bit of what we see with some of the destabilization around Trump's policies and him trying to lay off mass federal workers because he has no idea how the machine fucking works. But we are seeing more of it. And U said, oh, y'all said that you were providing foreign aid to help these countries, and only to find out you're part of the alphabet that is destabilizing these countries on purpose. And like that budget, we're at a point now where the empire just has to break. We've given enough time, and folks, Native Indigenous activists, Black activists, Asian activists have tried to give the United States enough time to get right. And the farther we get away from that, like the closer we have to get to the empire just has to fall.
So what I would say, back to your point, Amin, about where do these anti-war coalitions go, right? I would say, again, it's the cleverness of the democratic machine, right? There was a huge anti-war movement all throughout America when George W. Bush was the president. I mean, you know, the poetry represented it, the music represented it, right? Like it was all through the culture. And Barack Obama was the person that championed that voice. It was like, oh, the anti-voice, the anti-war voice won, right? And there's also just this incredible so again, right, it's interesting to me because it's the contradictions of wanting to have a democratic process without understanding how that type of power moves, how that works. I don't mean like the Democratic Party, but like coalition building and such, right? Because that forces you to deal with people that you don't have ideological purity with and other concerns. I'll give you a great example. There's tons of people that still follow Ron Paul to this day, who is perhaps one of the largest anti-war politicians that have come out of the American tradition in the last 30 years, 40 years. You know, Dennis Kucinich, much the same way, was an anti-war Democrat, and it takes those kind of coalitions working together. Now, this happens in Europe all the time. That's essentially how they defeated Macron's party, All of these coalitions came together. They agreed on one principle, this one thing.
Not you.
Right, right. And then they come, but that does not happen here. You can't, though, in the 80s, people voted Democrat or they voted Republican. It didn't become part of their identity, right? The fact that now people identify as Republicans, they identify as Democrats, they don't just vote that way. They're part of the party. And this is what's so funny when all these people have all this propagandistic jingoism about the Communist Party of China. You know what I'm saying? Like, people that are not in the government, that have no plans to run for political office, like, why would you identify as a political party at all? There might be a political party that maybe represents some of your views, and you might tend to vote that way. But for a person that's not a professional politician, why would you ever identify as
cult-like behavior?
Cult-like behavior. It's not that Kamala wins, we won. And that brings you the inverse. It's not that Kamala lost, we lost, right? And that's powerful. That is straight out of the COINTELPRO playbook. Like, we use these terms and people act like it's just like, oh my God, this is conspiracy theory, when this is actually documented fact. Like, these are real policies that existed. They didn't go away just because people learned about them. You know what I'm saying? Like, the truth doesn't really move people in that way until it affects you personally. And if there's any way to disambiguate it, you're going to try to do that, because nobody wants to believe it's as big as it really is, that it is as much of an agenda of keeping you powerless, feeling like, it is a existential conflict every time I vote, when the reality is nothing will substantially change, right? Trump's style is just brash, and like you said, to the point of, even he, with all his virtue signaling, is failing at what he promised, right? To keep his word and do all of, now we've spent over $1 billion the last weekend alone, right? Bombing Yemen. How's that for being fiscally responsible, right? Yet he's not making his own goals as far as like what he's trying to do at the border. Because the only way you can do that, it's quite simple. You'd have to stop, and this is what Keita referenced, you'd have to stop destabilizing these countries where these people come from so they can stay fucking there. And then they don't come here, right? Because the reality is, for all of the bravado and Biden's got a turnstile at the border, Barack Obama and Biden have shown themselves to be actually much better at deporting people from the United States than even these Republicans. The Republicans just do it in an ugly way. I'm going to drop you off in El Salvador in this government that we completely control. You've got a tattoo, so we're going to say you're MS-13, even though the Secretary of Defense has tats all over his body. Now that this masculine presenting Latino, right, has some tats, he's in a gang. And that's the double nature that people don't interrogate, because it doesn't behoove you to interrogate it.
And that's why, and this is why I understand why people push back against leftists, right? Because leftists argue that every single human deserves rights, that we innately have rights, that no one should be able to take away, regardless of the crimes that you have committed, or at least make it really clear from my Jewish perspective on what crimes are so unforgivable, and you don't put them in prison, you kill them as a community, right? But what capital demands is like, no, we need enslaved labor, of course, first of all, but then also that conservatives and the left and the right, they're always looking at it from the perspective of, you have an enemy. I can make it really easy who your enemy is. It's that Latino with the tat. It's that Black person with the weird purple hair. It is the person who's going into a bathroom and why don't you know who they are? And it contrives enemies. But at the end of the day, everybody has human rights, because that is the lever that they use to deny you human rights. And so we have to understand inherently like why we have to protect every aspect of our humanity, even when it's confronted with the horrific, because this is what we get. We get, as Amin, you pointed out, we have multiple genocides across the globe that is unending, and that we still have to hear, oh, Israel just made a mistake. Oh, it was an accident. Oh, the United States was just fighting for freedom. Oh, it didn't mean to do all of this. And yet the globe is getting worse. Our air, our food, our water, our well-being, our mental health, physical health, like, this is completely untenable, and there is absolutely no reason for it when we know that there are now trillions of dollars being hoarded by a handful of people. And if we just release that, the globe could be significantly better. That all of our drive towards technology, there's no reason we need to buy something every single year. Like, consumerism does not make sense in these freaking circumstances, that it leads to deregulation, that it just impairs our ability to live in such a way that it just doesn't make sense. And yeah, I wish all the billions we send to the Department of Defense could be used literally anywhere else, because even 1 million of that could significantly change the lives of anybody across the globe if we just released it little by little by little. But this is why you see that go up, along with why you see the police budget and police enforcement continue to rise.
I'm gonna just keep it going. This is maybe gonna be my last question. It was great. I really appreciate y'all talking about this lady, Christy Noem, the whatever, the lady that was out with the, she was like in the El Salvadorian prison, standing in front of the people. Like, that is just one of the most messed up racist things like I've ever seen. And like, but by the way, she's another Elon baby mama, right? Is that true? I'm gonna get the fact checkers on that. I'm not sure. It looks like nepotism hires or family hires. But you guys mentioned this, and I hear this all the time, and it drives me crazy. The markets will correct themselves. This is an American propaganda that is destroying the sort of upper middle class, or what's left of whatever is. There's no upper middle class, but whatever the I'm not impoverished class is. Like, I think people who say that need to acknowledge that in the 50s, like, the United States had like 48% of the global GDP. That is way, 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 way down. Not even that we measure it in GDP anymore, but their ability to control these markets globally has changed. Their ability to exploit the global South and destabilize other countries has diminished. So when you talk about the market's going to correct itself, for whom? Like you said, the billionaires are going to be fine. They're going to be able to make it through these recessions or depressions or whatever we get. But how is the market going to correct 800,000 homeless people? How is the market going to correct 30 million people uncovered in terms of health insurance? How is that going to, how is the market correcting itself going to deal with the collapsing infrastructure of the United States, whether that is transportation, whether that is healthcare, whether that is childcare, whether that is education, which is being defunded? The market correcting itself is a ridiculous, silly concept that people keep saying to make themselves feel better. And I think if people are going to look at, and this is why we talk about purchase power parity, because it is better in determining the average life of a citizen in a country. But we don't measure that here in the United States. We measure GDP, which is, how much goods, how much wealth is here, how much money is getting put into that stock market bubble, that investment bubble, that Bitcoin bubble, whatever it is, money that just sits there. And I think people can do a better job of thinking. Not us. Obviously, we're leftists, we're commies, we're socialists, we're so on and so forth, anarchists, all those things. We like, that's a ridiculous thing to say. And like, anytime someone says it, like, I have to like whip my head around and go into like full lefty mode, because like, I just can't have it, kind of out there. I'm going to go ahead and say, thought this was a good episode. I'm going to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts: Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify. Hit us up on our Patreon. You can see down below, we have our Patreon available. And yes, we appreciate our community there. Follow us on Inner City Left, like, subscribe. I'm going to give you guys the final word. Tanky, I'll start with you. Anything we missed? Final thoughts, final vibes.
Yeah, so one of the things you just brought out, and I think like is one of the most important things that Americans fail to understand, is the aftermath of World War II. Right? When we're talking about how much the industrial capacity of the Americans, what a percentage that was globally in the 50s, that's because of one very simple thing, unavoidable thing. Germany's industrial capacity was blown the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? France's industrial capacity was blown the fuck up. The British capacity for industrial, it took them the Marshall Plan. It took even the Soviets. Most of their industry had been destroyed in World War II. There's only one place that wasn't affected, industrially, and that was the United States. That's why their production was so much higher than the rest of the world in the 50s. It's not that American production got any better or worse. By the way, it got much better. But the rest of the countries built their shit up again. And then they were able to compete with the Americans, even though the Americans hadn't, they had more industrial capacity. But so you're given a head start. The other thing I would say about the market correcting itself is, if the market really corrected itself, the American empire would have ended in 2008. And that's just the bottom line, right? When the housing crisis hit, it was compared to a literal economic 9/11. The Federal Reserve and the American government bailed out all of those bad investments with all of those bankers. Nobody got their house, right? We've talked about it on the show several times. If the American government would have bailed out the actual investors, that is to say, Joe Blow that's got a house, right? Just buy the house and that money still goes directly to the banks, but that's not what happened. The money was given directly to the banks. The banks still foreclosed on everybody, and they double dipped. And that's the American way. And there were no real investigations. You had Bernie Madoff, who was essentially given the blame for all of this. And what's her name? The chick with Snoop Dogg. They were the whole face. Martha Stewart. They were the whole face of all the corrupt insider trading, and it was their fault. But none of the real bankers paid. Everybody double dipped. The bankers got super rich. The Americans got even more indebted, and it showed up in weird ways in our lifestyles. The cars got smaller, gone were the big suburban SUVs, and that whole Escalade style. Like, everything changed, but quietly. That wasn't the market correcting itself.
That's what happened. That's happened with home ownership too.
Yeah.
Everyone lost their house. The banks got their houses, and then they decided, well, we're just going to sell them to investment corporations, BlackRock, Vanguard, these type of places. Muscle, I'm going to give you the final word, my friend. What did we miss? Did we miss anything?
No, we didn't miss anything, but I think it's what I always say. Talk to your fucking neighbors, okay? Talk to somebody at work, okay? We have to have human connections. When we say that things are going to get worse, and it unfortunately has gotten progressively worse, it's not because, there's this mysterious woo-woo stars. It's because we pay attention to the way the globe moves, the way that these pressures, as you mentioned, the way that markets correct themselves, and the way that we survive these things is with each other. In every disaster that has happened of this level where people have lost everything, the way we survive it is with other people. And that's the way that we build collective bargaining. That's the way we build collective action. And it's never too late to start. Start with one person and say that you're going to care about what this person is going through and what their struggles are, and that you're going to fight for it in the ways that you can. But talk to your fucking neighbors.
Well said. I'm thankful for y'all as always. Great conversations. For Emoji Lil Tanky somewhere, key to the muscle. I am Amin TMK. This is the Intercity Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.